If you'd like to hit better drop shots, win more points, have more fun on the court, and win more matches, then you've clicked on exactly the right video. In this special lesson, we're going to talk about when to drop shot, where to drop shot, and then what to do next so that you can be as effective as possible. Let's jump right in and talk about when to drop shot. And the first time that you want to do so is when you find yourself already moving inside the baseline to receive a shot that's at least 2 or 3 steps inside the baseline. If you're at the baseline or behind, hitting a good quality drop shot is very difficult. And let me kind of diagram or illustrate why that is. If you want to hit a ball over to the other side of the court that lands really, really short, that's really difficult for your opponent to get to, the further back you are, the more on your own side of the court, the peak of that shot has to be. Let me kind of demonstrate this for you. In other words, if you're standing close to the net, if this is you right here, then you can hit the ball up and have it come down, and the middle of that arc is right over the top of the net. Easy, and you can hit that red X. But the further and further away from the net you get, the more on your own side of the court that apex has to be, the peak of the path has to be in order to actually land shorts. Another way to look at this is if you're far away from the net and the peak of your shot is right over the net, then the ball is going to land just as far away from the net as you're standing. So that's why when you're far away from the net, trying to hit a shot that lands really short is really tough because the net is blocking your path. So you have to hit a shot that peaks on your own side and starts falling and just clears the net on its way down to the other side of the court. So don't try to hit a good drop shot when you're far away from the net. You should be at least a couple steps inside the baseline so that the angles and the trajectory of the shot become easier and easier each step you take. The second time you want to look to use a drop shot is when your opponent is pushed really far back. And I know that seems obvious at first. Well, yeah, duh, they're further away from the net, so that would probably be a good time to hit the ball short. But when you watch tennis points at your local courts, you probably see drop shots thrown in at all kinds of random times, and there's not really any rhyme or reason. For whatever reason, tennis players just seem to kind of throw it in as like a last second kind of brain fart type of shot, and there's not really any correlating stuff going on the other side of the court that really makes any sense. So in general, when your opponent is off balance, when they're stretching or reaching off to the side, that could be a good time to drop shot on the other side of the court. When you've hit a really nice high looping, high bouncing topspin shot and you've just stretched them back, and especially when you combine that with the next ball leading you inside the baseline, once you start seeing multiple elements start to kind of stack up together, they're back, you're closing forwards, that's really a prime time to start looking to use the drop shot, assuming you hit it well. The third scenario, really kind of factor, because ideally we want to pair these up. Ideally we want to mix and match these. It's not always going to be the case or even necessarily have to be present where if you have all 3 of these, fantastic, you should absolutely be drop shotting. But the third one here is what are the quality of the net skills of my opponent? In singles, frequently players don't really develop their net skills, and especially their overhead. And so as much as the drop shot lob kind of tactic is a little bit of like a faux pas or maybe kind of an underhanded, kind of play in tennis, I mean, if they have a crappy overhead, if they have crappy volleys, and you find yourself coming inside the court frequently, rather than stepping inside the court and trying to smash winners and overtake your opponent with power and offense, why not just pair up that short ball with the weakness that your opponent has? If their transition game is poor, if their volleys are poor, if their overhead is poor, and especially if they happen to be far away, you happen to be drawing forwards closer to the net, some kind of combination of those 3 factors are really kind of the sweet spot for when you start wanting to look to use the drop shot. So now that we're clear on different elements to look for, let's talk about where to aim and what the pros and cons are of different targets. If this lesson has already been helpful, do me a favor and click the like button. It helps these videos get in front of more tennis players, which helps people enjoy the game more, be more successful. So thank you for that. All right, let's talk about target. First and foremost, please know that, let's say in this point scenario here, you're being drawn off to the side, hopefully a little bit forwards, and hopefully your opponent is a little bit out of position like we talked about before. And so you have two basic options here. You could either drop shot cross court, or you could keep the ball in front of you and hit the ball down the line, straight ahead. There's lots of different pros and cons, and I just want to get that out of the way right away. There's no like rule of thumb, like you should always drop shot cross court, you should always drop shot down the line. I'll give you some quick pros and cons for each so that you can decide for yourself and make a smart decision depending on who you're playing and what the situation is. So when you go cross court, the benefits here are, first of all, it's a little bit higher percentage in terms of margin because you're going to be hitting the ball closer to the center of the net, which means you have a little bit more space to hit over the top of the net. And when you hit that angle, you've got a little bit more distance to carry the ball as well. And that extra distance across the court gives you a little bit more space to create that arc that we talked about before, where the ball is coming up and then falling down, hopefully as short as possible. So that little bit of extra space is nice when you go cross court. When you keep it in front of you, the net's a little bit higher and the court is a little bit shorter. And so you're just a little bit more squeezed, and hitting the perfect drop shot is a lot tougher when you go down the line. So cross court, the big benefit here is that you have that extra space. The drawback is that when your opponent runs forwards to get to the ball, and they're like, let's say you just hit it at least decent, as they're sprinting forwards and reaching forwards to get the ball, the most obvious and kind of natural place for them to hit the ball is going to be straight forward someplace. And that means that they hit themselves into position. When you come up to the net in singles, you want to position yourself on the same side of the court that the ball is on. I don't have time to go into all the details, reasons why in this video, but I'll link to another lesson down below if you're curious why that is. Has to do with covering angles and the geometry of the court. But when you leave this side of the court exposed after hitting a cross-court drop shot, and your opponent closes forwards up to the net, you leave an opening for them to hit to that correlates with where their position is. They're already in the right position. They should be a little bit on this side of the court when the ball is on this side of the court. So the trade-off here is you're kind of helping them out a little bit by exposing the court and giving them position that they want to be in anyway, if they know anything about playing the net and singles. But the upside is you're giving yourself a little bit more margin and a little bit more room to hit a really nice, soft, short drop shot. So these are the pros and cons of hitting that drop shot cross court. Now we've set up that same scenario where you have closed inside the baseline by a couple steps, your opponent is a little bit out of position, and now instead of hitting the ball across and hitting it short and cross court, let's say that the point scenario is you keep it in front of yourself. Well, in this situation, the downside is that the net is higher here. You've got less court to work with compared to going at an angled cross court. So you're just kind of squeezed and there's not a whole lot of room to work with. You can still hit a good drop shot, but your touch has got to be more precise. The angle that you drop the ball down at just over the top of the net has to be more precise to hit a really nice shot. But as your opponent comes forwards, and hopefully you've hit a decent shot, and they're running, scrambling, putting that racket out, the open chunk of court that they're going to be most likely targeting hits the ball away from themselves. Now, it's going away from you too, but you kind of left them that same amount of space when you hit the ball cross court instead. The difference is that when you come over to this spot, in order to cover it, if your opponent does in fact target that spot, your opponent just left themselves really vulnerable down the line. Now, could they feasibly run down that drop shot and then get to the correct position in order to cover a passing shot on the next ball? They could, but they've got a lot less time to get in the right spot because they're close to the net, whereas you're back here at the baseline, much more comfortable in terms of scrambling back and forth. And once you hit that passing shot, if they haven't already started moving over here in the right spot, then they just left themselves really exposed on the other side. So it's the question you want to ask yourself, generally speaking, is how well do they do with their positioning? How quickly do they move? How well do they anticipate the next shot? If all those things are bad, then you might want to hit more down the line drop shots. If they're really good at all of those things, and they're actually pretty solid at the net, then maybe you want to try the other way. But to be totally honest with you, either one can work. You have to kind of decide for yourself which direction you target the best, which direction you hit your best drop shots, and also kind of test it out and see which way your opponent is more comfortable or less comfortable, and obviously target the one that works the best for you. If you'd like an A to Z playbook on how to hit your drop shot better, make sure to go sign up for free access to Essential Tennis Academy, where we have coaching modules that cover all the different parts of the game, including this one called Touch Shot Success, where you'll learn how to hit really soft, delicate drop volleys and drop shots. So go check it out now for free at essentialtennisacademy.com. So you've identified an opportunity, you've targeted one side of the court or the other, you've hit a fantastic drop shot. What do you do next? Should you move forwards, closer to the net? Should you retreat back to the baseline? Should you go behind the baseline? It totally depends on the quality of the drop shot that you just hit. Are you about to be in an offensive position, a neutral position, or a defensive position? Offensive means that you just hit a fantastic drop shot and your opponent is going to be lucky to even get to it before it bounces for the second time. They're struggling just to even get to the ball at all, and it might be a winner. If that's the case, if you've just put them completely on defense, then after you hit your drop shot, you want to take several steps forwards, because the chances of them running all the way up to the net, barely scraping the ball out of the court before it bounces for the second time, and then clearing the net and placing the ball deep with any kind of quality shot is extremely low. More likely, much more likely, is that they barely get a racket on it, it barely clears the net, and then it's kind of a crappy dribbling shot that lands short on your side of the court. I can't tell you how many millions of times I've seen somebody hit a drop shot and then stand at the baseline, watch their opponent struggle to get up to the ball, and just like barely chunk it over the net and have it land short. And the person who hit the drop shot just stands there and watches it and is like, oh crap. And they lose the point after a good drop shot. I mean, it probably happens a million times a day on tennis courts all around the world. So don't do that. When you put them in a lot of trouble, your response afterwards should be to close forwards and just kind of pressure them. Not only are they barely going to get to the ball, but just be like, here I am. Like, I'm actually coming forwards to pressure you more. You are, in essence, going to have to hit like a passing shot around me while you're struggling to get to the ball. That should be the pressure that they're under. Now, if it could kind of go either way, if it's neutral and it's an okay drop shot, but not fantastic, but it's also not sitting up 3 feet over the net and they're not getting ready to crush it, then just stand your ground. Hopefully, you move forwards a step or two inside the baseline when you hit that drop shot, and then after you hit it and you're like, like it's not the best, but it's not sitting up for them to tee off on either, then just stand your ground. And I know that might feel like an awkward place to be, but if they struggle with it more than you think, you don't want to leave yourself exposed to that crappy, short dinker over the top of the net. And if they do end up getting to it really quickly and easily, you could always quickly scoot back 2 steps and get back to the baseline if you identify, oh shoot, they're getting ready to really kind of take a good swing at this shot. So you don't want to charge forwards on this shot, but I also wouldn't recommend going 3 feet behind the baseline because they might end up struggling with it and putting it back short. So just stand your ground when it's a neutral situation. Finally, if it's a defensive, this is worst case scenario, like you tried to hit a good drop shot, but it just bounced up super high. Maybe they read it early, they got there, no problem. They're getting ready to smash the ball. Don't stay here. Definitely don't close forwards. Now you actually want to retreat and get at least a step or so behind the baseline and split step and just get ready for them to pound the ball. They might drop shot it back, but you can't really just run forwards before you see what they're going to hit because you just end up being a sitting duck in the middle of the court. So it's unfortunate, but it is what it is. You just put yourself in a tough spot, and so you've got to give yourself a little more space between yourself and your opponent who's getting ready to crush that crappy drop shot that you just hit. If you want some tips on how to hit a good drop shot, we'll put that in the first comment down below. And what was the other lesson I said we were going to link down below? There's another one too. Whatever else I said we were going to link down below, it's always in the first comment down below, so check that out. If this lesson was helpful, do me a favor and click the like button. And if there's any topics you'd like me to cover in a future strategy board session, let me know in the comments as well. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.